The scream tore through Incheon International Airport, and everyone froze because the little girl screaming at the top of her lungs was a child who hadn't spoken a single word in 14 hours. Hyun's tiny fingers were locked around the black woman's
release
hand,
the child.
like a steel trap.
She's the one holding me.
Her whole body shaking, tears pouring down her small face as the nanny tried to pull her away. The harder they pulled, the louder she screamed, until the entire arrival hall stood still, watching a 5-year-old fight 3 grown adults over a complete stranger. Chad Hyan was one of Korea's most feared CEOs. Rivals lost their voices in his presence. Entire boardrooms went silent when he walked in. But right now, standing in the middle of Cincinnati Airport, watching his silent daughter scream for the first time in her life over a woman he had never seen before, the man who feared nothing looked completely lost. His bodyguard stepped forward. "Mom, release the child. Release her." The Rasa Edwin looked down at the small fingers crushing her hand, then back up at the 4 men in black surrounding her. "She's the one holding me." She knelt down to the little girl's level, her voice gentle and warm. "Sweetheart, I have to go now. My driver is waiting." Ha-hun shook her head violently, gripping tighter, her eyes begging in a language louder than words. And then Chad Hyun did something he had never done in his entire life. "Please." His voice came out low, rough, almost broken. "Can I have a word with you? Just 5 minutes of your time. As you can see, she's not letting go anytime soon." The great Chado Hyun, the man who bowed to no one, had just said please to a stranger in front of everyone. What nobody in that airport knew was that the man begging a stranger to stay had spent 5 years believing the little girl holding her hand was the curse that ruined his life. If you're sitting there wondering how a successful businesswoman from Toronto, a woman who grew up without her own mother's love, became the only person a billionaire's silent daughter would hold on to, then you're exactly where you need to be. Drop a heart emoji in the comments if you're ready for this story. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next will change all 3 of their lives forever. But let me take you back, because this story didn't start at the airport. It started 14 hours earlier at a boarding gate in Toronto, with a little girl who wouldn't stop staring. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Toronto Pearson International Airport, Gate E73, Thiasa. Edwin sat with her boarding pass in one hand and her tablet in the other, reviewing distribution contracts for the 5th time. 34 years old, founder of Edwin Farms, one of the largest poultry operations in Ontario, co-founder of Little Sprout, a baby food company that had just been cleared to enter the Asian market. MBA master's degree. A woman who had built an empire out of nothing but pain and stubbornness. She was flying to Seoul to open Little Sprout's first Korean branch. 6 months minimum, new city, new language, new life. She told herself she was excited. The truth was, there was nothing in Toronto to miss. No husband, no children, and a mother she hadn't properly spoken to in 3 years. She boarded the plane, found her window seat in business class, and that was when she felt it. Eyes, small, dark, unblinking eyes watching her from the seat beside hers. A little Korean girl in a pastel pink coat, hair in 2 neat pigtails, sat buckled in next to a middle-aged nanny. The girl could not have been more than 5, and she was staring at Thea the way people stare at ghosts. Thea smiled and gave a small wave. "Hi there." The child didn't smile back. She shrank into her seat, pressing herself against the nanny's arm. But her eyes never left the face, scared but staring, hiding but unable to look away. Strange little thing, Thea thought, and returned to her contracts. 1 hour into the flight, the eyes were still on her. 3 hours in, the girl fell asleep, and when she woke up, her head turned immediately like a compass finding north, and the staring resumed. "Sweetheart, do you want to say hello?" The Rasa tried gently. "What's your name?" The girl flinched and looked down at her hands. The nanny gave an apologetic bow of her head. "I'm sorry, Mom." She doesn't speak. Not to strangers. Not to anyone, really. Oh, Thiasa's chest did something funny. That's all right. But it wasn't the silence that unsettled her. She had seen silence before. It was the way the child looked at her. Not with curiosity, not with fear of her skin or her hair, the way some children stared at a black woman for the first time. No, this little girl was looking at her the way a drowning person looks at a shore. Andasa knew that look because 29 years ago, in a small church in Scarborough, a 5-year-old Thiasa Edwin had looked at other people's mothers exactly the same way. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, with the cabin lights dimmed and the nanny snoring softly, the little girl's hand crept across the armrest. It didn't touch the Rasa. It just rested there, close as it could get, without asking permission. The Rasa looked at that tiny hand for a long time. Then she went back to her tablet and pretended her eyes weren't stinging. 14. And 1 to 2 hours after leaving Toronto, the plane touched down at Inenen. Passengers stretched, gathered bags, shuffled toward the exits, and the little girl was still watching her down the jet bridge through the long corridors. At immigration, 2 lines apart, those small dark eyes kept finding her over the nanny's arm again and again, like the Rasa was the only fixed point in a moving world. At baggage claim, Thea hauled her suitcases off the belt and told herself it was over. Strange flight. Sweet, sad little girl. Time to start her new life. The nanny was already leading the child toward the exit, where 4 men in black suit stood waiting in formation. And beyond them, a tall man in a charcoal coat checking his watch. Instead of watching the doors his daughter would walk through. But the child kept looking back. Once, twice, 5 times, 10. Little pigtails whipping around, eyes stretching toward Tharasa, until the nanny had to tug her forward like dragging an anchor. And Theora Edwin, who had spent her whole childhood being the girl nobody looked back for, felt something crack open in her chest. She could not let this child leave believing she was invisible. Hey. She left her luggage cart and crossed the floor, crouching down to the girl's eye level, holding out her hand with a warm smile. It was really nice flying with you, little one. You take care of yourself, okay? Can I at least get a high five before you go? The girl stared at the open hand. Then she took it. Not a high five. She wrapped her whole small hand around Thiasa's fingers and gripped with the force of a closing door. Oh, okay, sweetie. Thea laughed softly. That's a handshake. Also lovely. All right, now let go. Your people are waiting. The grip tightened. Sweetheart. The nanny bent down, speaking quick, anxious Korean, gently working at the little fingers. Hayun, We have to go. Your father is waiting. The child yanked her hand, with the raz still locked inside it, away from the nanny. Hayun. A man's voice now, flat and cold as a courtroom. The tall man in the charcoal coat had turned around at last, and his face said that he was used to a world that reorganized itself when he spoke. Come here now. And that was when it happened? No. The scream tore through the arrival hall like a fire alarm. Trolleys stopped. Conversations died. 100 strangers turned at once, because a tiny girl in a pastel-pink coat was screaming at the top of her lungs, tears erupting down her face. Both hands now clamped around a black woman's wrist, like her life depended on it. The tall man's jaw tightened. He gave a single nod, and 2 of the bodyguards moved in. Mom. The bigger one planted himself in front of Thyasa. Release the child. Release her. The Rasa looked down at the small fingers, crushing her hand, then up at the wall of black suits closing around her. Sir, are you seeing this? She's the one holding me. The nanny tried again to peel Horn off. The child screamed louder, twisting away, pressing her wet face against the Ross's arm. Every pull made it worse. Phones were coming out around the hall now. Somewhere, someone whispered a name. Isn't that Chado-hyun? And the whispers spread like spilled water. The Rasa took a breath. Okay, nobody here was going to solve this. So she did what she always did. She handled it herself. She knelt down to the girl's level, ignoring the guards, ignoring the father, and made her voice soft. Sweetheart, look at me. Hey, just me. Breathe. The screaming dropped to hiccups. I have to go now. My driver is waiting outside. I promise you'll be okay. Hayun shook her head violently, gripping tighter, eyes begging in a language louder than words. And then Chad-hyun did something he had never done in his entire life. He crossed the floor himself, stopped in front of this stranger, kneeling with his daughter, and the voice that came out of him was low, rough, almost broken. Please, can I have a word with you? Just 5 minutes of your time. As you can see, she's not letting go anytime soon. The bodyguards exchanged a glance. The nanny's mouth fell open. The great Chad-hyun had just said, please to a stranger in front of everyone. The 5 minutes happened by the tall windows away from the crowd. Hawun still welded to Teresa's hand between them. Doan didn't waste time. He never did. He reached into his coat, pulled out a sleek black card holder, and drew out a business card. 1 hour of your time. Have dinner nearby. Let her calm down, and my driver will take you wherever you're going afterward. He paused. Name your fee. Whatever your daily rate is, I'll triple it. Thyasa stared at him. My fee? You're a businesswoman. His eyes flicked to her luggage tags. Everyone's time has a price. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm proposing a transaction. Wow. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh, the kind with no humor in it at all. Sir, look down. Do you see this child? She's been crying so hard she's hiccuping, holding on to a total stranger in the middle of an airport. And your solution is to open your wallet. She shook her head. I don't want your money. I'm not worried about my time. I'm worried about her. Chado-hyun stood there, silent. In 5 years, no one had refused his money. Rivals took it. Partners chased it. Even Sarah had left calculating it. He didn't have a next move, because there had never needed to be one. And something about that, about this stranger looking at his daughter the way no one ever had, left the most prepared man in Korea standing in an airport with absolutely nothing to say. So Theora handled it herself, because while every adult present was trying to figure out how to make the child let go, she was the only one who understood the real problem. Hyun didn't need to keep her. Hyun needed to know she wasn't disappearing. So she knelt one more time. Listen to me, sweetheart. I'm not disappearing. I'll come visit you. I promise. But you have to let me see where you live, so I know where to find you. Deal? A long, trembling pause. Then Hoen nodded and did not let go. She simply started walking toward the exit, pulling Therasa along, the message unmistakable. Then come and see it now. Which is how Thea Edwin, who had visited Seoul before on business trips, but had landed today to finally settle in and launch her company's Korean branch, found herself cancelling her own airport pickup and riding in a billionaire's convoy to Hanam-dong instead. She had planned this move down to the hour, the service department, the office space, the first week of meetings. What she had not planned for was a 5-year-old rearranging her life within her very first hour off the plane. The child slept against her arm, small fingers still curled around her hand, while across from them the father sat in silence, staring at Thea like she was a problem his money couldn't solve. At the mansion gates, the release came one finger at a time, like a debt collector, reluctantly accepting a payment plan. The Rasa wrote her personal number on the back of a little Sprout business card and handed it to the nanny, not the father. Saturday, she told the little girl. I'll come Saturday, and I never break a promise. The taxi had barely pulled up before Hawoon reached up, plucked the card straight out of the nanny's hand, and pressed it against her chest with both arms, as if anyone in that household might dare take it from her. The nanny opened her mouth, thought better of it, and let the child keep it. Chad Hyun watched the taxi take her away. Then he looked down at his daughter, who was clutching that business card against her chest like treasure, and felt something he refused to name. Now, to understand what happened at that airport, you have to understand 2 broken childhoods. So let me show you the first one. Let me show you the Scarborough, Toronto, 29 years earlier. A church hall decorated for Mother's Day. Every child on stage, holding a paper flower. One by one, mothers came up as their names were called, hugging their babies, taking pictures. 5-year-old Therasa stood at the edge of the stage in a dress 2 sizes too big, holding her paper flowers so tight the stem bent, scanning the crowd for a face that wasn't there. Patricia Edwin was at a nursing exam that day, and a shift the next Mother's Day, and a conference the one after that. But Patricia's story was its own tragedy. At 22, she was brilliant and ambitious, and she fell for a charming man who promised her forever. When she told him she was pregnant, he looked her dead in the eye in front of everyone who knew them and said, I have never seen this woman before in my life. Anno. Her own parents called her a disgrace. Her father didn't speak to her for a whole year while living in the same house. And when the time came, she gave birth to Thyasa completely alone in a hospital room with no flowers and no visitors. And then Patricia did what wounded soldiers do. She got up, went back to school, and became excellent. Nursing degree, then a specialty, then a supervisory post. Everyone at church praised her. Look at Patricia, raising a child alone and still climbing. What nobody saw was the little girl at home learning to cook rice at age 7 because Mommy worked doubles, learning to sign her own report cards, learning that when anything went wrong, anything, she would be blamed first and ask questions never. When Thiasa was 10, money went missing from Patricia's purse. Patricia dragged her by the arm into the kitchen. "You took it. You're just like your father, a liar and a taker." The Rasa cried that she hadn't touched it. It didn't matter. That Sunday, Patricia marched her down to the church and put the matter before Pastor Joseph himself. And there stood 10-year-old Thea Rasa in the pastor's office in her good dress, being interrogated about stolen money, while her own mother watched with her arms folded. The pastor asked his questions gently, and the child answered through tears. She hadn't touched it. She didn't even know which purse. And when Pastor Joseph finally turned and said, "Sister Patricia, calm down now. I've known this child since she was baptized. I don't believe she did this." Patricia didn't even blink. "With all due respect, Pastor, I know my daughter better than you do." She took it. 2 days later, Patricia found the money in her other coat. There was no apology. Nobody went back to the pastor to clear the child's name. Life in that house simply continued as if nothing had happened at all. And that right there was the loudest part, because Thiasa learned that day that in her mother's eyes she could be guilty without evidence and never innocent with it. And it wasn't just at home. When Thiasa was 12, a neighbor from 3 houses down came marching up their porch steps one Saturday, dragging her son by the arm, shouting that Thiasa had pushed him off his bike and torn his shirt. The woman had barely gotten to the part about the shirt. She was still mid-sentence when Patricia's hand landed across the back of the head, right there on the porch, in front of the boy, in front of the whole street. "Mom, I didn't." He fell trying to snatch my "shut your mouth" when grown folks are talking. Patricia turned back to the neighbor with an apology already pouring out. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the shirt. You know how she is. You know how she is." Thiasa stood on that porch with her scalp stinging, watching her own mother nod along to a stranger's version of events, and understood something that no child should ever have to learn. Other mothers defended their children in the street and corrected them at home. Her mother punished her in the street before the complaint was even finished, and continued as normal at home. Never once, not one single time in 18 years, did Patricia ask, "What happened? Tell me your side." In Patricia's court, other people testified, and Thiasa was only ever sentenced. It turned out the boy's own sister later admitted he fell trying to grab Thiasa's handlebars. It changed nothing. No one told Thea sorry in that house. Sorry only ever traveled downhill. That was the pattern of their whole life. Thiasa did everything to be seen. Perfect grades. Patricia signed the report card without reading it. First place in a science fair. Patricia sent a neighbor to pick her up. And one evening, when 14-year-old Thiasa finally asked, voice shaking, "Mum, do you even love me?" Patricia looked at her exhausted from a double shift and said the sentence that would live in her daughter's bones forever. "Love? I feed you, don't I? Everything I lost in this life, I lost because of you. Be grateful I stayed." Thiasa never asked again. She left home at 18 with 2 suitcases and a scholarship, worked on a poultry farm to pay for what the scholarship didn't cover, and fell in love with the work, the animals, the mathematics of feed and growth. By 26, she leased her first barn. By 30, she owned Edwin Farms. Then came the MBA, the master's degree, and Little Sprout. Because somewhere deep inside, a girl who was never nurtured had grown into a woman obsessed with nourishing other people's babies. She built a beautiful life, and she built it like a fortress. No one got in. Certainly not Patricia, who now retired alone, watching her successful daughter from a distance, had begun calling. And oh, the phone calls. You've become so secretive. You don't tell me anything. Are you even seeing anyone? Will I ever carry a grandchild? And whenever Therasa, on a brave day, dared to reach toward the past, dared to say, "Mum, you know why we're like this," Patricia would perform her greatest talent, rewriting history in real time. Distant? What are you talking about? I was both parents to you. I worked myself to the bone for you. The church thing? That's what you're holding on to. I don't even remember that. You've always been so dramatic, so sensitive. I never said that. I would never say that to my child. You know your problem, Therasa. You like painting me as a villain to feel better about abandoning your poor mother. That was the cruelest part, not the childhood itself, the denial of it. Patricia didn't just refuse to apologize for the past. She insisted it never happened. She had rearranged her memories so completely that, in her version, she was a devoted, sacrificial mother, cry discarded by an ungrateful child. And every call ended the same way, with Patricia feeling neglected, Therasa questioning her own sanity, wondering for one dizzy second if maybe she had imagined it all until she remembered a porch, a stinging scalp, and a pastor's office. No, she remembered, and every call ended with Patricia never once asking herself who taught this child to survive alone. That was the woman who sat down in seat 4A from Toronto to Seoul. Now, let me show you the man waiting on the other side of the ocean. 8 years earlier, Chad Hyan was nobody. A brilliant broke founder running a logistics startup out of a basement office in Guro, eating convenience store ramen and pitching investors who didn't return his calls. But he had one thing that made him feel rich. You say Ra, gorgeous, sharp, a rising marketing executive he'd met at a trade fair, where she was working the booth of a company that had rejected him. They dated for 2 years, and in those 2 years, he loved that woman the way drowning men love air. She was the one who believed in him when the banks laughed. Or at least she said the words. He'd walk her home talking about the empire he was going to build, and she'd smile and say, "I know you will." What he heard was faith. What it actually was, he would only understand much later. Esra wasn't in love with the man in the basement. She was in love with the man he might become. She was holding a ticket, waiting to see if the horse would run. Then, 2 years in, Sarah got pregnant. He proposed on the spot with a ring he couldn't afford. She said yes, with eyes that were already calculating an exit. Horn was born on a rainy Tuesday in April. And exactly 2 months later, Dohan came home to find Esra standing by the door with her suitcases packed and the baby crying alone in the bedroom. "I can't do this, Dohan. I didn't work this hard to become somebody's tired mother in a basement apartment. The agency is sending me to their headquarters. I'm taking the offer. Sarah, we have a daughter." "No," she said it calmly. That was the cruelest part. How calm she was. "You have a daughter? I gave her to you? We're done." And Chad Hyun, the proud one, the one who never bent, begged. He stood between her and that door and pleaded like a man bargaining for his life. "Sarah, Please, please, just wait. 6 months. Give me 6 months. The investors are close. I can feel it. Take the job. Fine. Take it. We'll figure it out. People raise children between 2 cities. We can. His voice broke down into pieces. Don't do this. She's 2 months old. She's ours. I'm begging you. I have never begged anyone for anything in my life. Look at me. I'm begging you. Sarah picked up her suitcases and looked at him the way you look at an old apartment on moving day. You'll be fine, Diane. You always survive. And she walked out, didn't kiss the baby, didn't look back. The door clicked shut, and in the bedroom, 2-month-old Horn screamed for a mother who was already in the elevator. He stood in that hallway for a long time. Then the baby's cry pulled him out of it the way it would pull him out of everything from now on. Sleep, grief, self-pity, all of it. He walked into the bedroom, picked up his screaming daughter with hands that didn't know how to hold her yet, and sat down on the edge of the bed in the dark. Okay, he whispered to her, to himself, to the empty apartment. Okay, it's just us now. And that was how Chadoyan became a single father. No family to call, no wife coming back, just a broke man in a basement office life, alone with a 2-month-old and a promise he didn't know how to keep. What followed were the hardest months of Chadoyan's life. Diapers he couldn't afford. Nights split between a crying infant and investor decks. He strapped the baby to his chest and took meetings with spit up on his collar. He was mocked, pied, rejected, and then 6 months after Sarah left. The miracle, a massive shipping conglomerate, acquired a stake in his startup. Then a second deal, then a third. Within 4 years, Chad Hyan was one of the wealthiest self-made men in Korea, the kind whose name moved markets. But here is the poison the money never touched. In the mathematics of his broken heart, Dan had run the equation wrong. Sarah left because of the baby. Therefore, the baby cost him Sarah. Therefore, this child was the reason he lost the love of his life. He never said it out loud. He didn't have to. Children hear what is never said louder than what is. He gave Hawun everything. The mansion, the nannies, the imported toys, the best kindergarten in Seoul, and nothing. He never held her unless a photographer was present. Never ate with her. When she toddled to his study door with a drawing, he would glance up and say, "Give it to the nanny." The staff had instructions not to bother him with the child's matters. By age 4, Hawun stopped speaking to strangers. By 5, she barely spoke at all. A whisper to the nanny. Nothing to teachers. Nothing to doctors. Specialists were hired and dismissed. Selective mutism, they said. Rooted in emotional distress, they said. Do-hyun signed the checks and skipped the sessions. The trip to Canada had been the nanny's escort duty. Hyun returning from a visit to Doe's elderly aunt in Toronto. The one relative who ever kissed that child's forehead. And on the flight home, the silent little girl looked to her left and saw a woman with warm brown skin and kind, tired eyes. Children are prophets. They see what we hide. And something in that woman's eyes matched the ache in Hyun's chest so exactly that the girl could not stop staring at her own reflection. Saturday came, and true to her word at exactly 200 p.m., Thiasa Edwin walked through the gates of the Hanamong mansion, carrying a gift bag and a Tupperware of Canadian butter tarts. The housekeeper led her to the garden, and there was Horn, sitting alone on a swing, built for a child, with many friends dressed up and waiting. The nanny whispered that the girl had been sitting there since 9 a.m. The Ross's heart broke and mended in the same second. "Well," she announced, "I hope somebody in this big fancy house likes butter tarts, because I refuse to carry these back." And Horn smiled. Small, crooked, out of practice. But a smile. They didn't talk that first visit. The racer talked, and Horn listened, munching butter tarts and swinging her little legs. The racer told her about chickens, about the hen named Camilla, who thought she ran the whole farm, about baby food flavors that failed spectacularly. She asked for nothing, demanded nothing, and when she left, she said, "Same time next Saturday." And Horn nodded so hard her pigtails bounced. From a second-floor window, Chad Hyun watched the whole thing, with a coffee going cold in his hand. He told himself he was monitoring a stranger for security purposes. He was not. He was watching his daughter smile and trying to remember if he had ever caused that expression even once. The Saturdays became sacred. Week 3, Thiaza taught her to plant tomato seedlings in the garden. Both of them elbow deep in, while the horrified housekeeper hovered with towels. Week 5. Hawun laughed out loud. An actual sound, a squeaky little burst, because Thiaza imitated Camilla, the hen strutting through the coop, chest out, head snapping side to side. The staff in the kitchen froze. The gardener stopped his shears. Nobody in that house had ever heard the child laugh. And week 7 was the miracle. Thiaza was braiding a doll's hair, and Hun watched, hypnotized, then reached out and touched the own braids with one careful finger. "You like them?" "Ask me, baby. Use your words." "I promise they work." A long silence. The little mouth opened, closed, opened. "Can you teach me?" 4 words. Raspy, tiny, unused, but 4 words. Thiaza did not make it a moment. She just smiled and said, "Sit down in front of me then. Braiding school is in session." And while her hands worked gently through the child's hair, tears rolled down her face where Hahun couldn't see them, because she was remembering every night she had braided her own hair alone at 12 years old, wishing for hands exactly like hers. The nanny reported it to Du Hun that evening. "Sir," she spoke a full sentence to Miss Edwin. Du Hun set down his pen. "She spoke," he repeated flatly. 2 years of specialists, 2 years of silence, and this black woman had unlocked his daughter in 7 Saturdays. That week, something in him started shifting so slowly he didn't notice. He came home earlier on Saturdays, found reasons to walk past the garden. And one afternoon, the Raya looked straight up at his window, caught him watching, and waved him down like a school teacher summoning a truant. "Mr. Chaw, come plant a tomato with your daughter." I don't garden, and she didn't talk. People change. Sit. And Korea's most feared CEO, to his own astonishment, sat at the dirt in his $4,000 trousers, while his daughter, giggling, dumped a trowel of soil into his open palm. That evening, he ate dinner at the same table as Horn for the first time in a year. He didn't say much, but he stayed. And when Han whispered, "Good night" to him, he stood in the hallway afterward for a full 10 minutes, unable to move. A little girl just spoke for the first time in 2 years. Not to a specialist, not to her own father, but to a woman who simply showed up every Saturday. If that touched something in you, pause for a second and drop a love emoji in the comments for every child out there who just needs one person to show up. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because this family's journey is only beginning, and the hardest lessons are still ahead. 3 months into the Saturdays, the Seoul Global Food Innovation Summit opened at the Koch's Convention Center. Cha Do-hyun attended for business. His logistics empire moved half the food imports in the country. He was checking his watch through these opening speeches when the moderator announced the keynote. She arrived in this industry with no connections, no investors, and no safety net, and built 2 companies from the ground up with her own 2 hands. Founder of Edwin Farms and co-founder of Little Sprout, one of America's fastest-growing infant nutrition brands. Please welcome Miss Thyasa Edwin. Do-hyun's head came up slowly, and there she was, but not the woman who sat in his garden in jeans with soil on her hands. This woman wore a tailored ivory suit against deep brown skin, hair swept up like a crown, walking that stage like she owned the building and was considering selling it. Her voice filled the hall, sharp, funny, brilliant. She had 2,000 executives laughing at 1 minute and scribbling notes the next. She spoke about building a company from nothing, about feeding babies as a business model and as a calling. And the room rose to applaud her. Chad Hun did not applaud. He couldn't. He was too busy forgetting how to breathe. It felt like a veil had been ripped from his eyes, like he had never actually seen this woman before. This woman who had been sitting in his garden every Saturday, hidden in plain sight, while he was too blind and too dead inside to look. Every Saturday replayed itself in his head in brutal high definition. Her laugh, her hands in his daughter's hair, the way his silent child bloomed toward her like a plant toward light. He found her at the after reception, surrounded by executives fighting for her attention. He cut through them, he cut through everything. Ms. Edwin. Mr. Cha. Her eyebrows rose, amused. Fancy seeing you vertical. I'm used to you crouching over tomatoes. Have dinner with me tomorrow night. Just like that. No warm-up. Because Chad Hyun was a man who knew what he wanted. And once he knew, he did not joke, hesitate, or pretend. Thyasa laughed. Actually laughed, warm and unbothered. That's sweet. But I'm flying to Busan tomorrow. I have a factory audit Thursday and a distributor dinner Friday. Rain check. Mr. Cha. And she patted his arm, patted it like he was a promising intern, and walked away to her next conversation. Any other man would have been wounded. Do-hyun simply nodded to himself, filed it, and thought, she's a busy woman. Reasonable. I'll ask again. That night, for the first time since Yusei Ra walked out of his life, Chad Hyun could not sleep. They say there's no sleep for the wicked. And this man had spent 5 years being wicked to his own blood. So the sleepless nights came for him with interest. He lay in the dark, eyes wide open, seeing an ivory suit and a crown of hair. He turned to his left side. The hair was still there. He turned to his right side, still there. He grabbed his phone and tried to read quarterly reports at 1 a.m. and caught himself typing Edwin Farms into the search bar instead. He put the phone down, picked it back up, put it down again, disgusted with himself. Chad Hyun had stayed calm through hostile takeovers and billion-1 negotiations. And now one businesswoman on one stage had him lying in bed at 2 a.m., arguing with his own brain like a teenager. By 3 a.m., he gave up entirely. He got up, stood in his daughter's doorway, watched her sleep, and whispered words nobody heard. "You knew before I did, didn't you? You chose her at 30,000 thatat." He asked again the following week in the garden. "Dinner any evening you pick. Can't launch week." She didn't even look up from the seedlings. He asked again 2 weeks later by text, offering his private jet to save her time on the bus trips. That's a hilarious way to ask someone out, Mr. Cha. "No, thank you. Some joy commercial. The pretzels build character." Rejected 3 times. And each time, instead of retreating, the man went harder, not with pressure, but with attention. He learned her coffee order and had it waiting at her office receptions he happened to attend. He read every article ever written about Edwin Farms. He sent no flowers. He sent a handwritten analysis of Korean retail cold chains with a note. "Your distributor is overcharging you. Fire them. Dinner optional." The Rasa read that note 3 times and hated how much she smiled. But the Rasa kept saying no. She was 14 years old the last time she asked someone to love her. And she had promised herself, standing in that kitchen with her mother's answers still ringing in her ears, that she would never ask again. So she built her whole life on needing no one. And it worked beautifully, and for years. Men had come before, and every single time she found the exits before she found her feelings. Du-Hyun terrified her precisely because, for the first time, she couldn't find the exit. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, an alliance was forming because Horn, now 6, now talking in full sentences to Therasa and short ones to her father, now attending school like a girl reborn, had figured out exactly what her father was up to. And she had opinions. This was the evening the whole household still laughs about. Du-Hyun came downstairs in a black suit, holding an enormous bouquet of roses on his way to intercept the Rasa at a charity gala. Hyun took one look and crossed her little arms. Ah, you're doing it wrong again. Excuse me, Miss Theasa doesn't like roses. Roses make her sneeze. She likes tulips because they look like eggs. And why are you wearing your scary meeting suit? She says you look like a funeral in that suit. Diane stared at this 6-year-old dismantling him. She said, "I look like a funeral." "A handsome funeral," Horn conceded generously. "Wear the blue one and bring butter tarts, not roses. She misses Canadian snacks." Ha Una. He crouched to her level, genuinely bewildered. "Whose side are you on? Are you for me or against me?" And his daughter looked him dead in the eye with his own boardroom expression and said, "I'm for her. You're on probation." The bodyguard by the door made a sound like a dying kettle, trying not to laugh. Doan stood up, buttoned his funeral suit, and muttered, "Betrayed in my own house by a person I made." But he changed into the blue suit, and he bought the butter tarts, and Howin stood at the door inspecting him, like a tiny general reviewing troops before battle, and sent him off with a thumbs up. The alliance had one rule, and Horn enforced it ruthlessly. Do it right, or don't do it at all. When Du-Hyun once tried to impress the Rasa by name-dropping his net worth, 6-year-old Horn audibly groaned from the swing. When he ordered his assistant to clear Ms. Edwin's Friday schedule, and Therasa found out and roasted him alive in the garden. Horn sat beside her, nodding along at every point like a deacon in church. You can't buy her AR. You have to earn her like she earned me. Out of the mouth of babes, the man was being discipled in love by a 6-year-old. But here's the thing about that little general. Somewhere between the tomato seedlings and the tulips, Chad O'Hune stopped strategizing about Tharasa for a moment and actually looked at his daughter, really looked at this funny, sharp, loyal, wounded little person who had been living down the hall from him her whole life like a stranger paying rent in silence. And it broke him. It happened on a Thursday. He came home early and heard voices in Hyun's room. She was playing with her dolls, and he paused at the door to listen. She had one doll in a tiny suit and one small doll, and she was making them talk. Upper doll, look at my drawing. And then, in a deep, pretend voice, give it to the nanny. I'm busy. A pause. Upper doll, watch me dance. Deep voice. Not now. Go to your room. Another pause. Then the small doll in the tiniest whisper. Upper doll, why don't you like me? Did I do something bad when I was a baby? Chad O'Hune stood in that hallway and felt his whole chest cave in. Every specialist bill he'd signed without attending. Every give it to the nanny. Every birthday he'd appeared at for 20 minutes. Every time he had looked at this child and seen Sarah's suitcase by the door. 5 years of blaming a baby for a grown woman's choice. He had been given a blessing, and he had treated her like an invoice. He didn't sleep that night either. But this time, it wasn't a woman in an ivory suit keeping him awake. At sunrise, he did something that stunned the entire household. He cancelled his day. All of it. Investors, board calls, everything. And when Harwin came down for breakfast, her father was standing in the kitchen in an apron burning eggs. Hona? I took the day off. All of it. He cleared his throat, straightened the apron like it was a suit. I know the name of your school. I know your class. I pay the fees. I sign the forms. But I have never once walked inside. I don't know where you sit. I don't know your teacher's face, or which friend you play with, or what your favorite corner of the playground is. The great Chad Hyan, negotiator of $1 billion deals, stood there fumbling with a spatula. So today, I thought you could take me there and show me everything. Show me your world. And after that, he took a breath. I owe you 5 years of watching you dance. I'd like to start today, if that's okay. Hyun studied him for a long moment with those prophet eyes. Then she said, Okay, but you have to actually watch. No phone. No phone. He agreed. That day, Seoul's most feared CEO sat cross-legged on a playground bench for 2 hours, while a 6-year-old showed him every dance she knew. He pushed her on swings. He ate ice cream that dripped on his watch and didn't care. And at sunset, on the way home, a small hand slipped into his voluntarily for the first time in memory. And Horn said quietly, You're getting better, AA. He turned his face to the car window so she wouldn't see it crumble. The apology came a week later, and he did it properly, not with a toy, not with a trip, but on his knees, on her bedroom floor, at her eye level, in words a child could carry. Hauna Upa was very sad for a long time, and I blamed you for it. That was wrong. You never did anything bad. Not when you were a baby. Not ever. You are the best thing in my whole life, and I was too foolish to see it. I'm sorry. I will spend every day showing you, not just telling you." Hyun listened solemnly. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered the sentence that finished demolishing him. "It's okay. Miss Thyasa, says grown-ups are just kids who got hurt and forgot." And from that day, the father and daughter became a real breathing family. Breakfast together, homework together, terrible dad jokes that made her groan, and Saturday gardening as a trio. The staff whispered about it like a resurrection, because that's what it was. Now, while all of this was blooming in Seoul, there was a phone in Toronto that kept ringing. Patricia Edwin, 56, retired, alone in a house full of framed certificates and empty of family photographs, had heard the news at church from Sister Agnes of all people. Patricia, you didn't tell us. Your daughter has moved to Korea. My son saw it on the internet. They say her company is opening there. You must be so proud." Korea. Korea. Patricia had smiled through her teeth in that church hall, nodding along. Yes, we thank God. While inside, something was collapsing. Her only child had packed her life and moved across the entire planet, and Patricia Edwin found out in the church parking lot from another woman's mouth, like a stranger, like a neighbor. She drove home, gripping the steering wheel, dialed the number the moment she was through the door, and rehearsed her hurt the whole time it rang. "Hello, Mom," Thyasa answered with the voice she used for distributors. Polite, efficient, armored. "So, Korea." Patricia's voice was already sharpened. "I have to hear about my own daughter's life from Sister Agnes in front of everybody. Do you know how it made me look?" And there it was. 5 seconds in, and it was already about how it made her look. The Rasa closed her eyes on the other end of the world. "It happened fast, Mum. It's a business expansion. Even people in prison call their mothers Thyasa. How's your knee doing? 2 minutes about the weather in Toronto. 2 minutes about the church harvest committee. Goodbye." Patricia sat in her kitchen with the dead phone in her hand, surrounded by every certificate she had ever earned in a house so quiet she could hear the refrigerator hum, and for the first time in decades allowed herself to actually look at the question she'd spent a lifetime outrunning. When exactly did I lose her? And her memory, cruel and precise, offered her a church stage, a paper flower, and a little girl scanning a crowd. It took her 4 months to gather the courage. Then Patricia Edwin boarded a plane for only the second time in her entire life. The first time, 35 years ago, she had flown away from her shame out of Nigeria with Thyasa in her belly. This time, she was flying toward her. 14 hours to Seoul unannounced, carrying a lifetime of things unsaid in a carry-on bag. She appeared at Thea's office on a Thursday. Thea came out of a meeting and stopped dead in the lobby. "Mom, what is someone dead?" No, Patricia, stood there suddenly small in a way her daughter had never seen. "I came to see you. Just to see you." They had dinner that night at Thea's apartment. It was polite and unbearable. 2 women speaking across a canyon. Patricia praised the apartment. The Rasa thanked her. Patricia asked about the business. The Rasa gave the investor version. And then Patricia, hands wrapped around a teacup, said, "You know, you never tell me anything. I had to hear from Sister Agnes that you moved. Sometimes I feel like you treat me like a stranger, like I'm being punished." And Thyasa, 34 years old, CEO, unshakable in boardrooms, felt 14 years old again. Something in her snapped, quiet and final. punished. The Rosa's voice didn't rise. It dropped, which was worse. She sat down, her cup, and turned around slowly. Okay, Mum. You want to do this? Let's do this. You want to know why I don't tell you anything? Because for 18 years, everything I ever told you was used against me. Everything. I learned to keep quiet in your house the way other children learn to ride bicycles. Thyasa, no. You flew 14 hours. You will hear me. She took a breath that shook on the way in. I was 10 years old when you stood me in front of Pastor Joseph like a criminal over money that was in your coat the whole time. He defended me, Mum. A man who saw me once a week believed me. And my own mother, who I lived with, looked him in the face and said, I know my daughter. She took it. And when you found that money, she laughed. One short, awful little laugh. Nothing? No sorry. No going back to the pastor to clear my name. You just continued. Rice was cooked, church was attended. Life went on. I sat in that congregation every Sunday for years, being the girl who stole. And you let me. Patricia's mouth opened. The RAA was faster. And don't you dare say you don't remember, because that's the other thing you do. I tell you what happened, and you tell me it didn't. You're too dramatic. You're too sensitive. I never said that. You said it, Mum. I was 14, standing in that kitchen, and I asked you if you loved me. One question, and you told me, I feed you, don't I? Everything I lost in this life, I lost because of you. Be grateful I stayed. Her voice wavered, steadied. I never asked again. Did you notice? 14 years old. And I never asked my own mother that question again for the rest of my life. I was working myself to death for you. You slapped my head on that porch before Mrs. Peter even finished her sentence. It burst out of her now, 22 years late. Her son tore his own shirt, and you hit me in front of the whole street and told her, You know how she is. You know how she is. That's how you spoke about your only child to strangers. Other mothers defended their children outside and corrected them at home. You punished me in public and ignored me in private. And in 18 years, Mama, 18 years, you never once asked me, Thassa, what happened? Tell me your side. Not once. Everybody else in the world got a hearing. Your daughter got a sentence. The teacup trembled in Patricia's hands, and Thesa's voice finally cracked down the middle, all the way to the little girl inside it. I built a company that feeds babies, Mum. Thousands of babies every single day. Do you know why? Because I know exactly what a hungry child feels like. Not hungry for food. You always gave me food. I will give you that. There was always food. She pressed her hand flat against her own chest. Hungry for you. For one. Well done for one Mother's Day, where you showed up for you to look at me one time and see me. Not him. Not Nigeria. Not everything you lost. I was starving my whole childhood, Mom, and you were in the same house. I didn't build this wall between us, Mom. You didn't build it either. Your bitterness built it. He denied me before I was born. And then you spent my whole life making me pay his debt. Silence. Long, terrible, honest silence. And then Patricia Edwin, who had not cried since a hospital room with no flowers, 34 years ago, put down the teacup and wept, the ugly, shaking kind, decades deep. "You're right," she whispered. "God help me. You're right. I looked at your face and I saw him. I saw everything I lost. My parents' love, my reputation, my whole imagined life, and made a 5-year-old carry it." She looked up, wrecked. "You were the only one who stayed with me, Therasa. The only one. And I treated you like the enemy. I don't deserve to ask, but I am asking. Can we start again? Not as we were, as something new." For a long time, Thea didn't answer. She sat across from her mother at that dinner table. The food between them long gone cold, untouched since the second course. She looked down at her own hands, wrapped around her cup. 34 years of ache sitting in her throat while the city glittered away behind the glass, like none of this was happening. "I can't give you a new past, Mom," she said finally. But she thought of a little girl on a plane of second chances, arriving in strange packaging. "There's a little girl I want you to meet on Saturday. She's teaching me that broken things can grow back, so we can try slowly. That's all I have." Patricia nodded through tears. "Slowly is more than I hoped for." And that Saturday, in a garden in Hanamong, an elderly Nigerian woman was formally introduced to a 6-year-old Korean girl. Within the hour, Patricia had Hahoon tucked against her side on the garden bench, telling her the story of the tortoise and the birds, voice rising and falling, hands acting out every part, pausing in all the right places, while Hahoon gasped and giggled and begged. "Then what happened, Grandma Patricia? Then what happened?" And Therasa stood watching her mother laugh with a child, really laugh, head back wholeheartedly, telling the same folk tales she had never once had time to tell her own daughter. She quietly excused herself and went to cry beside the tomato plants where Diane found her, said nothing, and simply stood beside her, handing over his pocket square like it was routine. "Don't," she warned, wiping her eyes. "I said nothing. You're smiling." "I'm always smiling. You literally never smile. You look like a funeral." "A handsome funeral," he corrected. "According to my daughter, that's a direct quote from you." Theasa's mouth fell open. "That little she told you. She negotiates with information. I have no idea where she learned it." And Theasa laughed wet and sudden right through the tears, and neither of them mentioned that they were standing close enough to share a heartbeat. And it was exactly then, of course, it was then because Trouble reads calendars that use Ra came back. She had seen the tabloid photos. Korea's coldest CEO at a playground, at a school recital, holding his daughter's little backpack like a bodyguard of one. The empire she'd walked away from had grown 100 times over. And the man she'd discarded was now one of the richest, most powerful bachelors in the country, a single father whom half of Seoul's high society was scheming to marry. Her career had plateaued. Her options had thinned, and Ura had always been excellent at mathematics. She appeared at the mansion gates on a Sunday, dressed in soft cream like an apology, holding a teddy bear. "I'm Horn's mother," she told the intercom. "I've come for my daughter." The housekeeper who answered the intercom went pale. The nanny, hearing the name, instinctively reached for Howen's hand and drew her toward the stairs. Word moved through the mansion in whispers. "She's here. She is here." And by the time User's heels clicked across the marble of the formal sitting room, every member of staff had found urgent business elsewhere. Do Hyun met her there, and the moment she walked in, 6 years collapsed. Her voice, her perfume, unchanged, all of it, as if she'd stepped out of his oldest wound and into his house. She sat across from him with her hands folded, and when she spoke, her voice trembled at all the right moments. Tears rose exactly when they should. I was young, Diane. I was terrified. Not a single day passed that I didn't think of her, of you. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I've come to fix it. We could still be what we were meant to be, a family, the three of us. For 2 weeks, the man wavered. She was suddenly everywhere. At Hyun's school gate at pickup time, waving like she'd always stood there at his office at noon, setting his old favorite coffee on his desk. She still remembered the order in his messages at midnight. Do you remember that rooftop in Guro? I drove past it today and cried. He would read those messages twice, put the phone face down, and pick it back up. He caught himself one evening standing in front of his closet, looking at the tie she used to like. He wore a different one, but he had looked. And at night, lying awake, he could hear 2 voices arguing inside his own chest, one saying, "She left you on the worst day of your life," and the other whispering, "But she came back on the best." And Horn, poor baby, was handed a mother the way a child is handed a surprise exam. "Horna, this is Yuriyama. What does a 6-year-old do with that sentence?" She bowed politely. She answered questions in a small voice, but she watched. At dinner, she watched how the woman's eyes kept sliding past her, always past her, landing on her father, checking, measuring, confirming he was looking. When Sarah laughed at Hohen's drawing, Hyen noticed she laughed before actually looking at it. And one night at bedtime, she asked the nanny very quietly, "If she's my mum, why doesn't she ask me anything?" Nobody had an answer for that, and Thyasa saw the tabloids reunited. CEO Cho's first love returns, and did the thing that cost her the most, and showed her class the most. She stepped back. No calls, no competing. She kept her Saturday promises to Horn, and was warm and unchanged with the child. But with Di-hyun, she became polite, distant, seamless. If this was his heart's direction, she would not stand in the road. She had spent her whole life refusing to beg for love. She was not going to start at 34, but her absence did what her presence never could, because Dune felt it immediately. The garden went quieter. The air went thinner. And Horn, week after week, kept asking one question at dinner, with the timing of a tiny prosecutor. "Appa, when is Miss Thyasa coming for movie night again?" She said you'd know. Then came the evening that ended it. Essera had arranged it herself. A family dinner, candles on the table, the chef given instructions, her phone propped discreetly against the flower vase, because moments like these deserve to be captured. She'd seated them just so, Do-hyun at the head, herself at his right hand, Han across from her. The picture was perfect. She was mid-story, some glittering anecdote about a campaign she'd led, with her hand resting lightly on Do-han's forearm when Han reached for her juice. 6-year-old hands, a glass too tall. It happened the way it always happens. A wobble, a grab, a miss. The juice spread across the white tablecloth, like a small orange country expanding its borders. "Watch what you're doing." The words cracked across the table like a whip. Sharp, cold, furious. For 1/2 second, Yera's face was not the face she had worn for 6 weeks, the soft eyes gone flat, the sweet mouth pulled tight, pure icy irritation flashing through. The look you give a thing that has damaged something of yours. Then the mask snapped back on instantly, seamlessly. Oh no. Sweetie, are you okay? Did it get on your dress? It's all right. Accidents happen. She was already dabbing at the tablecloth, laughing a small, silvery laugh, waving for the housekeeper. We'll get it cleaned right up. Too late. Horn had gone still, completely still. Her hands came off the table and folded into her lap. Her eye-holders curled inward like a plant touched by frost. Her chin dropped, her eyes fixed on the stain, and did not move. And when the housekeeper gently asked if she wanted a new glass, the little girl who now chattered through every dinner, who narrated her whole school day, who negotiated dessert like a lawyer, said nothing, not a word. Airplane silent, old silent. And Chado Hyun, sitting at the head of that table, watched his daughter fold back into the child she used to be, the one he'd built with 5 years of coldness in 1 second flat. He knew that silence. He had manufactured that silence. He knew exactly what it cost to break it. Saturday by Saturday, tulip by tulip, and this woman had undone it between the main course and dessert. He set down his chopsticks without a sound. Sarah was still talking. The anecdote had resumed. Her hand had found his forearm again, and he looked at that hand, then across the table at his silent daughter, and the veil lifted for the second time in his life. He saw everything at once, 6 weeks. And she had never asked Hohen's favorite color, never asked about the years of silence, the specialists, the school. Every conversation, every road led back to him. His schedule, his name, his life, his company, his memories, his forearm, and the teddy bear from the gate, he suddenly remembered, was still sitting on the hallway table 6 weeks later, still in its plastic wrap. Hauna. His voice was gentle. His daughter looked up. Go with Auntie and pick your pajamas. I'll come read to you before bed. I promise. He waited until the small footsteps faded up the stairs. Then Chad Hyun turned to Yusra, calm as Sunday morning, and said, Stay. We need to talk. Sarah, let me tell you what I finally understand. His voice was calm, the calm of a man reading a verdict he'd spent 6 years writing. You didn't leave because of Hun. You left because of you, and you didn't come back. For Hyun, you came back for the version of me that Forbes writes about. That's not fair. The tears came on quiet, beautiful, spilling perfectly. 6 years I regretted you. I was 26 and terrified. And yes, I made a mistake. But I came back. Dohan, doesn't that count for anything? I'm the mother of your child. Mother? He said the word quietly, turning it over like a counterfeit coin. Then answer one thing. What is Hyun's favorite color? Silence. What grade is she in? What's her teacher's name? Quote me 1 sentence. One that our daughter has said to you in 6 weeks. Sarah's mouth opened, closed, and then the tears shut off like a tap, and the truth came hissing through perfect teeth. Oh, don't be dramatic. She's 6. She'll bond with anyone who buys her enough things. She bonded with some random woman from an airplane, for God's sake. I'm offering you a real family, and you're interrogating me about colors? She heard it herself, half a second too late, the mask slipping clean off and clattering onto the table between them. She almost reached up as if to put it back. Duhan nodded slowly, almost gratefully. Then he slid a folder across the table. This is a visitation arrangement, supervised, because if there is one drop of real mother in you, my daughter deserves to receive it, and I will never block that door. But hear me clearly. That door leads to her, not to me. There is no us. There will never be an us again. I am. He paused, tasting the sentence, surprised to find it true. I am completely, peacefully over you. You cured me yourself. Thank you for coming back. I needed to see you clearly, to finally close the door. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and left her sitting in that grand room with the folder and the silence. She left the folder on the table, and she left Seoul within the month. No goodbye to Horn, no call. The teddy bear still on the hallway table in its plastic wrapping, until the housekeeper finally, quietly threw it away. Yu-Ra had come for a kingdom, been offered only motherhood, and found motherhood not worth the trip. Some people do not change. They only change tactics. Du-Hyan sat alone that night with two truths. One, he had finally fully moved on. The ghost of 6 years was gone, and the house felt lighter than it had in a decade. Two, he was in love completely, not with a memory, with a real present tulip-loving hen impersonating empire-building woman whom he had ignored into a polite distance like an absolute fool. Appa? Hyun appeared at his study door in her pajamas, arms crossed, prosecutor face on. Miss Thea didn't come for 3 Saturdays. 3. Fix it. I'm going to tonight. He looked at his watch. 9:40 p.m. He looked at his daughter and Chad Hyan, who did not joke around about anything that mattered, took off his reading glasses and stood up. Tonight, she was still working because of course she was. The launch numbers had come in that evening. Every projection broken. And while her team went out celebrating, Thiaza had raised one glass, gone home, and spread the spreadsheets across her dining table. Downstairs, the night guard stood up from his desk. Sir, visiting hours are. So you can't just... He was talking to a man's back. The elevator doors were already closing. Now it was past 10. Her heels off, hair down, the city glittering through the tall windows of her duplex apartment. The doorbell rang at 10:15 p.m. She checked the camera and blinked, opened the door, and found a billionaire standing in her hallway, slightly out of breath. No tie, no rehearsal. You're my Saturday, he said. Excuse me. He stepped inside, and his voice came out softer than she had ever heard it. For months, I organized my whole life around one day of the week. I told myself it was for Hun. It wasn't only for Horn. He shook his head slowly. I started buying tulips before I understood why. I started coming home early and standing at windows, and every Sunday morning I would wake up and feel that the house was dimmer. It took me too long to understand what that meant. It meant the light left on Saturdays. He took one step closer. Thiaza, everything good that has happened to me, walked off a plane, holding my daughter's hand. Her voice came back because of you. Her laugh. I heard my child laugh for the first time because of you. Somewhere between the tomatoes and the butter tarts, and you waving me down from my own window like a schoolboy. My heart started again. It had been stopped for 6 years, and you restarted it, and you didn't even notice because you were too busy loving my daughter. Her eyes were shining now. He kept going gently. I'm not asking you for dinner anymore. Done asking for appointments in your calendar. I'm here to tell you something instead, plainly the way you deserve to hear it. I love you, Brasa Edwin. I love the woman who keeps her promises to children. I love the woman who built an empire with her own 2 hands and still kneels in dirt on Saturdays. I am yours at whatever pace you choose, on whatever schedule you allow, with a 6-year-old chaperone if required. You spent your whole life being the one who shows up for everyone. Let me be the one who shows up for you for as long as she kissed him. She crossed the room, took the collar of Korea's most feared CEO in both hands, and shut him up entirely because this woman had spent 34 years hearing love disproven in speeches, and she had exactly 0 interest in another speech. She wanted the evidence. The evidence was excellent. When they finally broke apart, both of them slightly stunned, Duhan blinked once, and then, being an opportunist to his marrow, simply picked her up. What? Put me down. That is not what I meant. You kissed me. Signals were exchanged. I meant as a conclusion, not an invitation. Duhun, I have spreadsheets open. They'll auto-save, he said, and carried her up the stairs. That's not what her protest dissolved into laughter somewhere on the landing, and then the laughter dissolved into something softer, and the lights in the duplex went out 1 floor at a time. Now, this is a family channel, so we will stop following them up those stairs politely and skip ahead. But let the record show 3 things. The spreadsheets did autosave. Nobody checked them until Monday, and from that night forward, the Rasa, Edwin, and Chad Hyan were never really apart again. What followed was the season of their lives. Real dating, awkward, funny, glorious. A billionaire learning that this woman would genuinely rather tour a fertilizer facility than a yacht. Sunday dinners where Patricia, now visiting Seoul so often she had her own guest room, and a Korean phrase book, took over the kitchen and taught the housekeeper her secret recipes, while the whole family gathered around the table to try each dish. Horn appointing herself the official taster and delivering her verdicts like a little judge. 10 out of 10. Grandma wins again. Do-Hyun and Patricia, 2 reformed resenters, became unlikely friends who understood each other's regrets without ever discussing them. He proposed on a Saturday, naturally in the garden, naturally by the tomato plants, with Hawoon standing beside him, holding the ring box like the world's proudest, best man, bouncing on her toes. He didn't make a speech this time. He had learned. He just knelt in the dirt in his good trousers and said, "Marry us." Us. And Thiaza looked at the man and the little girl, wearing identical hopeful faces, and said yes to both of them. The wedding was intimate. A garden ceremony. Tulips everywhere because they look like eggs. Patricia in the front row crying into Dohan's endless supply of pocket squares. Hyun as flower girl, taking the role so seriously, she placed each petal individually like landmines. When the officiant asked who gives this woman, Patricia stood and said, "Her mother does." Late but completely. And half of Seoul's coldest business elite wept into their programs. A year later, the Rasa stood in their bathroom, staring at 2 pink lines. And when she showed him, Chad Hyun, the man who feared nothing, sat down on the edge of the bathtub because his legs stopped working. Hyun was informed at breakfast and immediately began drafting a curriculum for the baby. Item 1. How to know Appa is joking. His face doesn't change. The pregnancy was beautiful, and it was also, let's be honest, a hostage situation with Do-han as the warden. This man tracked her folic acid like quarterly earnings. He attempted to ban her from her own factory floor at month 5, and Theorasa, being Theorasa, kept working like a woman possessed, negotiating a distribution deal from a birthing prep class via earpiece. Which brings us to the first quarrel. Month 7 of the pregnancy, she had promised, hand raised, promised to be home by 6 hours. So Do-han did something he had never attempted in his life. He gave the chef the evening off and decided to cook for his pregnant wife himself. How difficult could it be? He ran a company with 11,000 DNMP, employees. By 5:40 p.m., the kitchen looked like a crime scene. He had followed a cooking video with the intense focus of a man defusing a bomb, pausing it 17 times. The smoke alarm went off twice. Horn wandered in, surveyed the wreckage, tasted the soup with a spoon, and made a diplomatic face. It has personality, ha ha ha. He banished her from the kitchen, but by 6 it was done, slightly burnt, oddly shaped, but done. 2 candles lit, the table set with his own hands for the first time in his life. 6th quant came. No. Tharasa. 7. He rearranged the candles. Traffic. He told Hyun. 8. He tucked Hyun in and read her bedtime story with one eye on his phone. Something important came up. He told her, closing the book, "Your mum's building something big." Horn reached out from under her blanket and patted his arm gently. The way you comfort someone at a hospital. And then looked at him, looked at the phone in his hand, looked at the faint smell of burnt soup still drifting up from downstairs, and then she started giggling. What? What's funny? You waited by the door. She wheezed in the apron. The guard told me you checked the gate camera 6 times. She rolled over, thoroughly enjoying herself. The great Chad Hyan, waiting for a girl to come home. Ah, you have it bad. Go to sleep. You paused the cooking video 17 times. Go to sleep, Holland. Okay. Okay. She snuggled down into her blanket, still snickering, and just as he reached the light switch, her little voice floated up one last time. The candles were a good idea, though. N out of 10. He turned off her light, hiding his smile, and went back downstairs to wait. 9. He blew out the candles, relit them, blew them out again. At 11, Theresinos, the front door opened, and Theresa walked in, 7 months pregnant, shoes in one hand, phone pressed to her ear with the other, still negotiating. No, listen. Tell them the contract stands as written, or there's no contract. Hold on. She saw him standing in the kitchen doorway, saw the cold table behind him, the dead candles, the apron he was still, for some reason, wearing. I'll call you back. Do you need me at all? It came out louder than he intended. Months of it coming out at once. Look at me, Theresa. I cooked me. I burned my hand on a pot at 4 camps in the afternoon, like an intern. And I stood here rearranging candles for 5 hours like a fool because my wife, my 7 months pregnant wife, cannot hand a single phone call to the vice president I hired for her. He tore off the apron. You run the company like you're alone. You carry my child like you're alone. You won't take the driver. You won't take help. You won't take anything from me. What am I? Thiasa decoration. My own wife treats needing me like it's a disease. And she fired back because 2 CEOs in one kitchen is a hostile takeover with candles. I built everything I have with these 2 hands, because nobody came when I called. Nobody. You want me to just switch that off because you learned to use a stove one time? Independence isn't an insult to you, Du-hun. It's how I survived. You're not surviving anymore. His voice cracked, and that crack changed the whole room because it wasn't anger in it. It was fear. And they both heard it. He stopped, breathed, and then this man did the thing that made him worthy of the ending of this story. He walked around the counter, took the shoes out of her hand, took the bag off her shoulder, set them down, and took both her hands in his, one of them still wearing a small burn from the pot. Listen to me, he said quietly. I'm not Sarah. I'm not your father. And I'm not your mother. I'm not leaving. And I'm not keeping score. And you don't have to earn your place in this house with output. You learn to need no one because no one showed up. I know. Oh, my love, but I'm showing up every day. Burnt soup and all. You don't have to put the armor down all at once. Just hand me one piece at a time. He pressed her phone gently out of her grip. Start with tomorrow's calls. Please, let me carry something. You've been carrying everything alone since you were 5 years old. You're not alone. You're just the last one to find out. The Rasa Edwin stood in her own kitchen, 7 months pregnant, shoes off, empire waiting, and cried like the 14-year-old who never got an answer. And then she pushed the phone fully into his hand and said, wet and laughing at once, Fine, fine. Tomorrow's calls are yours. They're impossible people. They will ruin your whole week. I look forward to it, he said, and held the phone like a trophy, and held her much longer. Then they sat down at midnight and ate the cold, burnt, oddly shaped dinner, every single bite of it. And it was genuinely terrible, and she told him so, with her mouth full, and he agreed, and they laughed until the baby kicked in protest. That is how you handle a quarrel, gentlemen. Take notes. Their son arrived on a spring morning, April, of the same month as Ha-yun, which he declared correct. They named him Cha-ha-jun, so brother and sister would share a syllable, share a root. And when the nurse placed him in Do-his arms, the man looked down at his boy and made a vow out loud in front of witnesses. You will never spend one single day wondering if I love you, neither of you ever again. Horn, 8 now, held her brother with the terrified concentration of someone handed the crown jewels and whispered, I'm your big sister. The dad is nice now. I fixed him. And 1 year later, one golden Saturday, the garden in Hanamong filled up for Cha-ha-jun's first birthday. Tulips everywhere. Grandma Patricia, permanent Seoul resident, now running the dessert table with military authority. 9-year-old Horn, loud, bossy, gloriously unrecognizable from the silent girl on that plane, directing the entire party, like a tiny general, because some things never change. At the Doljabi table, baby Hun ignored the money, ignored the gavel, ignored the stethoscope, and grabbed a tomato that Horn had smuggled onto the table, and the whole garden roared. And in the middle of it all, Chad Hyan stood with his arm around his wife, watching his daughter teach his son blow balloons next to a grandmother who flew 14 hours to say sorry. And he thought about mathematics, how he had once run the equation of his life, and marked his greatest blessing as a loss. How Thea's mother had done the same. How 2 children, one in Toronto and one in Seoul, had paid for debts they never owed, and how one of those children grew up, got on a plane, and sat down next to the other one. "What are you thinking about?" Thyasa asked, leaning into him. 14 hours, he said. "She stared at you for 14 hours. I used to think she couldn't speak." He watched Hyun's head tip back with laughter across the garden. She was speaking the whole time. I just wasn't the one she was talking to. So what do we take home from this story, my dear friends? Sit with me for a moment, because this one deserves more than a goodbye. To every father listening, maybe life broke you, and somewhere along the way, you started making your child pay for it. Hear this clearly. Horn did not chase Sarah away. Sarah chose the door. Your child did not ruin your marriage, kill your dreams, or steal your youth. Adults make adult choices, and children just happen to be standing nearby when the blame is handed out. Do Hyun spent 5 years being wicked to the one person in his house who loved him without conditions. Don't spend 5 more of yours. Your child's silence is not peace. It's a wound learning to hide. To every mother raising a child alone, Patricia's story is your warning, not your judgment. She survived everything: the denial, the disgrace, the loneliness of a foreign country. She fed her daughter, schooled her daughter, kept a roof over her head, and still lost her. Because children do not eat sacrifice. They eat presents. They eat "tell me your side." They eat "one well done." Provision without affection is a house without heat. Everything is there, and everyone is cold. Don't let the man who denied you collect his debt from your child's face. And to everyone who grew up like the starving in a house full of food, hear this too. What happened to you was real. Even if they deny it, even if they call you dramatic, even if the whole family sings a different song, you are not crazy, and your healing does not have to wait for their apology. But if the apology ever comes, even 16 years late, even 14 hours by plane, leave a crack in the door. Not for them, for you. Because Therasa didn't lose anything by trying again slowly. She gained a mother in the front row of her wedding. A child is never the reason your life fell apart, but a child may well be the reason it comes back together. Resentment is a debt collector that only ever knocks on the wrong door. And love, real love, is not proven in speeches. It is proven on Saturdays. If this story touched you, do me one favor. Go hug your child, or call your mother, or forgive your father. Whichever one God is whispering to you right now, drop a flower in the comments if you believe every child is a blessing. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed to the family yet, what are you waiting for? The next story is already waiting for you. Until then, this has been the story of Thyasa Dan and the little girl who wouldn't let go.